Okay, so we've gone through the Mishnah, PIRKE Shesh, 6th PIRKE, Mishnah number 7. We've now coming back to understand the difference between each one of the verses that the Mishnah brings to prove its point, and what is added in each one of those verses. The first pasuk says it is chaim, it is life, lemotzehem, for those who find it, l'chol b'saro marpeh, and it brings healing to all of his flesh. Ladies, what did you notice in this verse? What does it say? What is extra? What is different? Just shout it out. We don't have the time for hands. Life, flesh, okay? Healing. All the body, peace to the soul. Okay. Sorry?
What's them?
The words of Torah. For they are life to who finds them. Now I want to point out, and this is how we're going to do this today, okay? I want to point out the words that I think are the key words so that you understand what the diuk is meant to be. Why does it say it's life for he who finds them? This is what we're doing today. If I gave it to you, you didn't find it. The process of looking, of noticing, is the very first thing. You come alive when you're like, oh my gosh. What do people say? Rabbi, I never noticed that. That's what they're saying. It is in the surprise of Torah. It is when you realize there's something here. There may be something there that wasn't there before. If there's something that was not there before, your surprise brings it to life. Okay? For they are life to he who finds them, and a healing to all his flesh. The Torah says that a person is supposed to look at the Torah and keep the Torah, Asher Anochi Mitzavecha Yom, that I command you today. Says the Gemara, what do you mean I command you today? Bechol Yom, every day, Yihiyu be'enecha kechadashim. The words of Torah, the mitzvot, should be new to you. When a person first starts becoming religious, if a person converts to Judaism, they're on fire, they're so excited by each new mitzvah. Oh my gosh, I have to learn about it, I'm so excited, I'm into this new thing. You ever hear a new person into a diet? Oh my gosh, keto is amazing. And they won't shut up about the new diet. After a while, nobody cares. They don't care, you don't care, right? When something is fresh, it's new, it brings you to life. So the first prerequisite, says the Mishnah, teaches from the pasuk, is you need to find the Torah. It needs to feel and retain that level of freshness, that level of surprising, perspective changing learning. You find the treasure. You don't earn or work for a treasure. And the Mishnah says if a person feels like that, then it brings healing to all his flesh. All his flesh means that there's a general sense of healing. So I want to think about that for 1 minute. When do you need healing for all your flesh? I want you to think about the last time you felt you don't feel good, you might need a medicine for a headache. You might have a migraine, you might have a stomach ache, you might have broke your leg, but there's sometimes where the whole person just feels like they need to be healed. You know how you feel like when you're at the bottom of a flu? You feel that headache, fever, stomach ache, every part of your body just feels aching. That's true in a physical sense, but sometimes it's also true about the way we feel in life. Emotionally, we just feel battered. Like I have nothing left to give right now. This went wrong, and then this went wrong, and then this went wrong. And the healing that I need is a healing. Ulechol b'saro marpeh. How many times do I get a message after a class where someone says, Rabbi, I was in the dumps, I was depressed, I was sitting at home, I turned on your class, I got involved, you don't know what your class did for me. I never got those messages. But if I were to get a message like that, it would be amazing. No, I'm saying when you do get that, you've all experienced it. You went to a class and it was just the pick-me-up you needed. I hope one day that you'll say that about this one, but at least for the time being, You know what I mean. You've had it once. Ulechol b'saro marpeh. You learn something that just fixes you. You learn that you're good enough as you are. You learn that HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves you even when you make mistakes. That's a healing to all flesh. It's a panacea. It's a salve all. Okay? That's what the first pasuk communicates. We move on to number 2. So the key words, if you were to circle something there, it would be finds and the word all flesh, all his flesh, healing all his flesh. The second pasuk, what do you notice about the second pasuk? Ladies, what do you notice? Navel. What else? Marrow. Very specific, right? Well, sorry, go ahead, Ronnie.
Very specific. It indicates specificity. And navel is where you point where you're born, and the marrow is something that depletes you as you get older.
So what Ronnie is sharing is that the Torah is not only a feel-good thing, which is just inspiring. Like, when you read one of those inspiring quotes, it's like, you can do it. And you're like, I can do it. Right? It didn't say anything to you specifically. It didn't, right? It's just this general thing. And sometimes you read that quote and you're like, cheese. Right? The Torah in the second pasuk, we're first of all communicating that actually the Torah has specific answers to your specific problems. If you're struggling with a problem in a relationship, open up the pages of the Torah. If you have an issue, trying to figure out something at work, something about your purpose, your mission, your joie de vivre, look in the Torah. The Torah will help you with that specific issue. So searching for specific answers in the Torah is a way where the Torah improves and gives you life in this world. But it goes more than that, as Ronnie pointed out. The navel is the source where a person is born. It's true. But it's more than that. You're attached to your mom by the umbilical cord at your navel. But what is happening through that umbilical cord? The person is receiving all the nourishment that they need. And what is fascinating to me about the nourishment that arrives through the navel is that it is fundamentally different than the nourishment that you receive throughout the rest of your life. That nourishment is processed by you, it's chewed by you, tasted by you, swallowed by you, broken down by you. The nourishment that comes from the mother through the umbilical cord, it courses through your veins in the most natural way. You don't need to do anything. It is part of you. One of the most beautiful things about the Torah is that its concepts, its precepts, its truth is already inside of you. Before you learned how to learn it, you know it. When someone's teaching you something and you say, yes, that's right, how did you recognize the rightness of that right? When something just feels wrong or just feels right, how did you get that? Where did your gut get that truth compass? It shall be health to your navel. You were given the beauty and the gifts of Torah on a natural order, in a way that you don't have to do anything. So parts of Torah are the things that you go out and seek, for they are life to he who finds them. And part of the lessons of the Torah are the safeh, the natural things that you infuse in yourself, that are infused in you by your genetic predisposition to the Torah as a Jew. It also speaks to the education that you got at home, from your mom, from your dad, where actually no one sat you down for a lesson. You just learned how to be Jewish by being at home. The nature of learning by osmosis is what is being described in the Refuot Tihye Lisarecha. The second part of the pasuk, though, communicates something radically different. And marrow to your bones. The Torah is marrow to your bones. What is the function of bone marrow? Fascinating. What are you saying, Robin?
Oh, nothing.
That you guys are on track?
No. That's a different comment.
Oh, a different comment. What is fascinating is the bone marrow itself. What is its function in the health of a human being? There are predominantly three things that happen within the bone marrow, the marrow within the bones. The first thing happens from the red blood cells. The red blood cells from within your bone marrow, they aid in sending oxygen throughout the bloodstream. The second thing that happens from within the marrow is that it creates the platelets, which ultimately will create the life-saving clotting that you need in order to stop bleeding, both external and internal. The last thing that happens from blood marrow is the white blood cells, which actually combat infections from the inside of the body. So whereas all of your health, all of your flesh describes the external nature, can I just point out, you see that smile on your face? You know why you guys are smiling so much? Because you got it without me. That's the difference. That's the difference that you feel in, for they are life to he who finds them. I'm telling you something, no one's smiling and giving high fives. The minute you got it yourself, what do you feel like? You see, you just proved the first sentence in the Mishnah. Excellent. So these three things, they represent, and this is so interesting. Okay, one more time. The function of the bone marrow is the ability to heal the body from the inside out. All the time, people are searching for spirituality and they are searching for answers. But what they don't realize is that the source for the answers to the problems that you have, it doesn't exist from without, it exists from within. You can solve the blood clotting issue that you're having outside your arm by the innermost part of the person. Marrow of the bones is the innermost part of the person. You can't go deeper into the person than inside his bones. And in fact, it is fascinating that the word in Hebrew for bones is atzamot, which is the same word that we use in Hebrew for the self. Atzmo, the bones of a person, the innermost part of the person, the self. It has within it the healing power to stop issues on the outside of the body, to fight off infections, to be able to ensure that every part of the body has the life-giving oxygen that it needs. Trust your soul. The third verse, what did it add? What did you notice different in the third verse? Sorry, so if you're circling something on the second verse, circle navel and marrow, okay? What about the third verse? Okay, so we now moved on to a tree. Good. What's different about the tree than what we've seen thus far? Sorry?
Natural creation?
It's a well, I'm a creation.
Yes. Different.
Sorry? Don't doubt yourself.
Tree that gives life.
Well, I feel like with the mirror, it's like you're getting resources from someone else. You're like,
Excellent. It's external. It's not you. So up until this point, we've all been talking about the person themselves. Now we're learning about a tree of life for those. Etz chaim hi lemachazikim ba. Circle the words, hold fast to her. Circle the word tree. And now we introduce a new concept. And happy are those who support her. Happy is a new concept. The Mishnah is expressing that when a person is living a life without joy, they are not alive at all. Why? Because the header of this Mishnah is, Torah is great for it gives life. You can't then tell me about happiness unless the Mishnah defined life as happiness. Is that clear? Yes? So we've got four things to notice in this pasuk. She is a tree of life for those who hold fast to her, and happy are those who support her. What's interesting to me about this, number one, is we've just introduced for the first time an external source of life. Let's go back to the tree of life itself in the Garden of Eden. It had fruit, you ate from it, and that fruit gave you, high five, come on, Ronnie and Robin, right? It gave you life. Something external to you gives you life.
Why is it feminine?
Sorry?
Why is it feminine? She is a tree of life. I mean, now it just switched to feminine rather than either generic.
Why doesn't it say Etz Chaim Hu? You're saying, yeah? The answer to that, right? Really, Etz is not a feminine. It's not a feminine word, right? So why does it use he? Sorry? Why does it use she? Excuse me. It is a tree of life. Lemachazikim ba, in her. Why? Yes! The source of life, whenever you're describing a life source, that's always feminine. What is Chava, the first woman's name? She's called Chava. Ki hi hayita em kol chai, for she was the mother of all life. So when we're describing the tree of life that is Torah, this external life source, this battery that powers you when you are dead, when you are depleted, we refer to it in the feminine. Okay? So number one, we're talking about an external source. But what's so interesting to me here is those who hold fast to her. What does that give you the indication? Someone that's holding tight onto something. When do you hold tight onto something? So I can't hear all at once, just one at a time. Comfort, when you want it to save you, good. So the desperation maybe makes you call. Maybe the feeling, the need for comfort. What else? Value. Good. What else? Normally, when are you grabbing tight onto something when that thing... What? Important to you. You're missing one simple one. Too many voices. Just one at a time. It's life-saving. Good. Mother. Good. Love. You're all missing one point. You hold on tight to something that is leaving, slipping away. Right? That's when you hold on tight to something. When you feel, if I don't hold on tight, what will happen? It will get away from me. The image I have, most people think of the tree of life. You know what they think of? A tree in the middle of a garden and some dude just being a California-born tree hugger. That's not how I see the tree of life. I see the tree of life growing out of the side of a cliff and some guy holding on to it. That's a tree of life that you are holding fast onto. What the Torah is communicating here is that the default state of a Torah observant Jew is similar to the state that's described in the universe, in all of physics. One of the rules of the universe is the law of entropy. What is the law of entropy state? Nobody?
Everything's in motion.
Not everything's in motion. Everything is deteriorating. Everything is falling apart. In the universe, everything ultimately is unraveling. So a person is born, and as they get older and older, what happens is the cells age, they get weaker. So the law of entropy is that things eventually fall apart. In order to ensure that you don't suffer the law of entropy, exercise is important when you're 20. It's double as important when you're 40, triple as important when you're 60, quadruple as important when you're 80. because you are battling a uphill battle of the law of entropy. That's just the way it works. You don't use your brain when you're young, nothing happens to your brain cells. You don't use your brain when you're older, your brain cells deteriorate and die. People who are active, that's why people who don't retire or who are active doing Sudoku and word puzzles, and they're keeping their brain sharp, they're reading a certain number of new books every year, their mental state, their overall health state is upkept. They let that go, the downhill is so fast. So the Torah is the same way. If you are not fighting to hold on to it, you are losing it. Okay? She is a tree of life for those who hold fast to her. But what's interesting is that the first indication is of a person hanging on the tree off the side of a cliff for dear life. The second part of the verse is, and happy are those who support her. So one person is being supported by the tree, and one person is supporting the tree. You get life if you hold on, and you get happiness if you push it up. You know what the answer is?
Yes.
Sorry?
Yes. Elevating the Torah and
So one way of understanding it is that there's just two different things that are happening here in the Pasuk. I think that there's two things that are happening here, but they're really united. They're the evolution of a process. Many people come to Torah and mitzvot because they are in dire need of the life-giving support that Torah and mitzvot give. Rabbi, someone's not well in the family, which Tehillim do I say? I'm going to start coming to shul. I really feel like I should learn more. You're hanging on, gripping on the tree with all of your might. But the irony is, that's a person who comes to the Torah not from a place of happiness. So they literally are, holding on with all their might. The Pasuk then continues and describes what happens to a person that stays in that loop. There's a famous joke that they say, the parashiyot that we're up to in the Torah now in Vayikra are, we just read Acharemot, and then you have Kedoshim, right? And then you have Emor, right? So we're in Emor now. So the famous joke goes, Acharemot, after somebody dies, Kedoshim, people come to say Kaddish, Emor, they say Kaddish. Acharemot, Kedoshim, Emor. You see a guy you never see in shul, what's going on? He's got yahrzeit. Acharemot, Kedoshim, Emor. But these guys that come to shul for a year straight, saying Kaddish, you know what almost always happens? Almost always? They keep coming. What once was something that they felt that just supported them, that it took them from their place of despair, of sadness, it gave them structure and meaning and let them feel like they could do something for this person that they love that they can no longer do anything else for. Eventually there comes a point where it's something that brings them personal joy. And then what happens? They become the biggest advocates for going to shul. Guy I know started giving ma'aser, 10% of his earnings, when his fortunes went south. And now he's the biggest advocate that I have to talk to young people about giving ma'aser. He's passionate about it, even though now his business is doing great. So now the thing that supported him, he is supporting, and with joy. That's the second level. The third, that's what's added in the third pshat. It's teaching you that when a person has nothing left and they feel like they can't generate it from within themselves, they can reach out to Torah, even if it doesn't feel like it's speaking their language, as an external tree of life. And if they hold on tight enough, so much so that it feels like they're one with this thing, they can also achieve this saving grace of Torah. The fourth pasuk, what does it add? What did you notice? It describes two things: a garland of grace, and describes a necklace about your neck. What do those two things share in common? Sorry? They both encircle the person. Every time we encounter the concept of a circle, what do we know? What do we learn from that circle? Like, as an example, on the holiday of Sukkot, we surround the Torah, we walk round and round and round, carrying the lulavim. What's in the middle? On the bima, the Sefer Torah. When we dance round and round with the Sefer Torah, what are we indicating? A circle is made around the thing that is most important. The most important thing is at the center of the circle. That's how it works. In fact, the pasuk says, the Gemara says, Atid HaKadosh Baruch Hu la'asot machol latzadikim. God is going to make a circle of the great tzadikim, a giant circle in Gan Eden. V'hu yoshev b'neihem. He puts a crown on every one of their heads, and he sits in middle of them. And all the tzaddikim from all the points on the circle all point to the middle, and they say, "This is our God. Kivinu lo v'yoshienu." We hoped, we put our faith in Him, and He saved us. What a remarkable sight that will be. And what I would give, and I'm sure what all of us would give, to be chosen to be part of that magnificent circle in Gan Eden. A circle indicates the thing at its center is the most precious. The concept here is that the Torah seems to be encircling you. Why would the Torah be circling you? And the answer, my friends, is actually that you are more important than the Torah, which sounds sacrilegious to say. What does that mean, you are more important than the Torah? How could that be? The answer is that the Torah is a giver of life. It's the electricity, it's the outlet, it's the plug. But you're the living being that the Torah was created to give that life to. What is more important? The air, the machine that gives the oxygen, or the recipient of that oxygen? It was created for you. The purpose of the Torah was for you to become what the Gemara says. Look at these simple, foolish people who stand up when a Torah comes into the room, but who do not stand when a rabbi comes into the room. A rabbi is a living, breathing Sefer Torah. It is a Sefer Torah brought to life. So the pasuk over here is communicating. It's teaching you this Torah that we always think of from the inside out. There's me, and then there's the Torah, and I'm following its ways. That's not how you look at it. The Torah was designed to become your operating system. It was designed to become the code that your processes run on. And therefore, it gives us this idea of the encircling nature of a Leviat Chen and a necklace around your neck. Now the next pasuk continues with this theme, number 5. What was added in 5 that wasn't there in 4? Excellent, Leah, the crown. What the pasuk is telling you is that actually the Torah turns you into a king. What does that mean, the Torah turns you into a king? The concept is so beautiful and it's so deep. Says the pasuk, when the Jewish people left Egypt, they were servants to Paro. When they left, they were servants. Says the pasuk, and I gave you the luchot, charut al haluchot, engraved on the tablets. The Gemara says, charut al haluchot, engraved on the tablets. Al tikre charut, don't read engraved, ella cherut, rather freedom. A person who does not have Torah is a de facto slave. They are a slave to, as Rambam puts it, the havle hazman, the stupidities of the day, the zeitgeist, whatever happens to be popular then. When a person has the Torah guiding them, they are actually free to be themselves. They don't need everyone else to tell them what to do and what to be. They have God Himself expressing to them the best way for a human to live and a human to think. So when a person practices the Torah, they're not a slave to fashion. They're not a slave to peer pressure. They're not a slave to the whims of political theory. As the pasuk says, a crown of glory she shall grant you. The Torah is the ultimate kingmaker. That's what we learned from verse number 5. What did you notice in verse number 6? What did you circle in 6? With me your days shall be increased, and years of life shall be added to you. Same thing. Same thing twice. More days is more years, right? No. No. What the pasuk is communicating is that if a person is not being careful, they live their life by years, and they don't live their life by days. A person who's living their life by days makes every single day count. As the pasuk says about Avraham, ve'Avraham zaken, and Avraham was old, ba bayamim, coming on in age. Says the Gemara, ba bayamim means he came to God with all of his days. And he was able to say about every one of the days that he lived, this is what I did with April 7th, 1962. This is what I did with March 4th, 2001. He came to God and every one of his days was pregnant with meaning, with value, with vitality. Says the Torah, with me, your days shall be increased. You know, if you're living your life and your job animates your life, what brings you to life on days when you're off? If you're living your life and your life is your family, what animates your life when your family's on vacation? You have people who gave their whole life to their kids. And then in a matter of years, they become an empty nester. And they have no idea what to do with their life. And it is a brave person who is capable of reinventing themselves at that stage and beginning effectively a new life. Says the pasuk, with me, Torah gives you a structure for every day. There's Shema every morning. There's no days off. Modeh Ani. When are you off from Modeh Ani? Never. The structure, the discipline of Torah, the feel-good factor of knowing that you did good so you can feel good is something that literally emboldens, enlivens, and enriches every single day of a person's life. Says the pasuk, do not pay attention only to years. 2020, that was a good year. Really? Those are 365 different days. You're describing them as one unit? You know what that's like? It's like going to a restaurant and they brought you the soup and the soup was freezing. And they brought you, your steak, and your steak was so hot you couldn't eat it, you burned your tongue. Would you go home and someone says, how was the food? And you would say, warm? It's not an aggregate average. The soup was freezing, and they brought me the steak so hot I burned my tongue. Those are two items that exist in isolation. So the pasuk is communicating this mindset to us. And if you live your life that way, that every day needs to have something special about it, and you think to yourself, it's already 11 a.m., I don't got nothing new. And you go out and you do something new. It's already 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I haven't done anything meaningful today, nothing worthwhile. Could you imagine how much that would make your life so much better? That you would never have a day go by where that day was not worth living? Gorgeous. The 7th pasuk, what did you notice that was different? Sorry? Long days in her right hand, and in her left wealth and honor. So in your right hand you have life. In your left hand you have wealth and honor. The Torah is communicating something very simple. Ultimately, a person cannot live life in this world without material wealth. Not huge wealth. You need to be able to buy the basic needs that sustain some form of a quality of life. You need to be able to feel respected in your life, to feel like you're an important person, to have the pride that keeps you going, that makes it worth moving forward. Okay? That's the left. Torah says life itself is the right. Always recognize and have in your priorities what is worth putting in your right hand, which represents your strength, and your left hand, which represents your weakness. It's still necessary. God gave you that second hand. But as an example, when we talk about children, we talk about mikarevo biyamin, bring them close with your right, v'dochako b'smol, and push them away with your left. Why would you ever push your child away? The point is, the person needs to realize, this is wrong what you've done. This is incorrect. I'm not happy about this. But says the pasuk, the right hand drawing him close needs to be stronger than the hand that's pushing him away. So that the end result is that what you're left with is what the right hand is involved in. Too many people mix up their hands and they seek wealth and honor with their right hand. Their job, their position, their name in the community, it's so important to them. And they give up on life itself. Would you say that anything is more important than a person's children? Of course not. And yet people all the time, for the sake of wealth, are sacrificing their relationship with their children in terms of time away from home. Yes, it's a great job. Yes, it's a great opportunity. Do you remember your kids' names? That's a person who switched hands. Ultimately, that person is not living life. They're living wealth, they're living kavod, but they're not living life. Says the pasuk, Gedolah Torah, which through its lessons, it gives you life. It reminds you again and again and again and again what is important, what's less important, and what rates higher on the hierarchy of life. Which brings us to our final pasuk, Ve'omer, and it says, Ki orech yamim ushnot chayim ushalom yosifu lach. For the length of days, ushnot chayim, and years of life, v'shalom yosifu lach. What do we add here?
Peace.
Peace. Peace. So we described long, not just days and years, we described days and years again, right? Orech yamim ushnot chayim v'shalom. We always end with shalom. What's the final verse in Yitkadal V'Yitkadash Shmei Rabbah? We finish all that beautiful prayer. Oseh Shalom V'Rav. How do we finish the Amidah? Oseh Shalom V'Rav. Why do we finish? How do we finish the Korbanot? Shalom. Always shalom, shalom, shalom. Birkat Hamazon, same thing. Why? Our rabbis tell us, Ki en keli machazik bracha ela hashalom. There's no vessel that holds blessings more than shalom. So the Torah says, we just gave you so many different things, so many wonderful gifts. But unless you have shalom, your vessel is cracked. So all the beautiful things that you have are slipping through your fingers. Ay, ay, ay. Ay, ay, ay. How many times are you sitting there in a room with a family that has everything? Everything. All the money in the world. Beautiful kids, wonderful wives, and they're torn apart, fighting every day, years in court. Fighting. They don't have a single night where they go to bed without acid reflux, with heartburn. All the blessings, they can't feel it, they can't see it. You might be so blessed. Your kids hate you, they'll never come over. What do your blessings feel like in your big, beautiful house with your big, beautiful salary, but your kids won't come over? It's like a life not worth living. I remember once a person who, unfortunately, he was a very contentious person, a very arrogant person, but he had a great heart. He liked kavod a little too much. Anyway, I went to visit him. We went to his house. He takes me up on the roof. He got a big, beautiful jacuzzi on the roof of his house, right? We're sitting, we're chilling, we're relaxing. I was friendly with him. And I said to him, it was his birthday. I said, I would have wanted to get you something, but what do you get for the guy who has everything? And I'll never forget, he's sitting there in the jacuzzi like this, looking at me. And he says, the guy who has everything, he goes, Rabbi, I have nothing. And I apologized to him. I'm sorry, I was insensitive. In jacuzzi, top of that house, top of the world, everything he wants. But he has a terrible relationship with his wife, terrible relationship with his children. What was it all for? You at work so that you could come home from work and enjoy that which you worked for. What did he come home to? To the fights and the anger and the you should have, and this was mine and I deserve, and what was it worth? Anyway, Hashem should bless us. Adonai Varech et Amo Bashalom.